It's been going quite good actually. It's more or less like expected. Most of the listeners were already digitized when we started the process in Nordland in January, but the rest of the people are now doing the last part of the upgrades. They are buying radio sets and they are upgrading their cars. So we think the last listeners will also come along, and in yeah, probably next year we will be back on pretty much the same figures that we had before we started this process, we think.
Has it been hard to convince people to buy a new radio? I think the proposition should be easy to sell. When digital television switched over, people bought new televisions. Every time a new mobile smartphone is introduced, people buy new smartphones. But it seems to me that people have a resistance to buy a new radio for some reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of feelings for the old radio sets, that's for sure. But our experience is that when people try the new channels, the new offerings, they really like it. And you know, more than half of all radio listeners in Norway, they use the new channels every week. So the new channels have become very popular. So that's a way we see that people actually want it when they have tried it. But of course, before you have experienced new channels, you could be pretty annoyed by the thought that you have to change your radio set because it works, you know?
Yeah, and as you say, people do get attached to their radio. It's, I think it's more than a utility to some people. It's a friend.
Yeah, but it's also something good about this, because when people are so attached to their radio sets, that means radio is important for them. And if you compare this with other devices people throw around all the time, it's something about radio which is important, and I think that's a good thing for radio.
You mentioned the new channels. How many new channels are there in Norway?
We have 5 channels on the national FM networks, and on the national DAB networks we have 30.
And what about community radio? I don't know much about the community radio sector in Norway.
We have around 200 community radios spread all over the country, and they have the opportunity to either stay on FM or do DAB as well, or only DAB if they want to. So they can choose for the next 5 years. So that's up to them. But there's a lot of construction going on now, building new local DAB networks. So that's also a good thing. So this means that the local radio can also be revitalized and get larger, cover larger areas. They can broadcast 24 hours a day, and they have no strings attached when it comes to the content they need to, no content requirements from the government. So actually there's also several new opportunities for local radio.
Is it going to cost those community radio stations a lot of money to make the transition? How is the costing working?
Yeah, I think the main problem is that for many of the local radios, they don't have any other radios to share the cost with. Because, you know, that's one of the big benefits with digital radio, is that you build a network and there's a lot of radio stations which can share the cost. That's why DAB gets cheaper than FM. But if you're the only local radio in your area, you have a problem. So that's why the government have started an economic support program. So they get support to invest and run their new DAB networks.
Okay. Will that cover all the costs for those stations?
That will depend from how big network you need to cover the area you want. So I can't really answer that in a general way. But for someone, I think it will cover most of it at least.
A move like this, the world is watching and learning from what you're doing, but I'm sure there are people who don't want to change their radio or don't want to change, and you must have had some criticism.
Oh yes, of course. It has been criticism all the way since we started this project back in 1995. And I don't think that's very strange actually, because this is a really big step for radio. It's a big technology shift. It's a big shift for the whole country. So it would be very strange if people didn't engage in this and ask questions. And I think it would be sad for radio if no one cared. So again, this shows that people really cares. But our experience is that when people really understand why we do this to make radio able to continue be a strong media and be there for many years, to continue be free, continue to be available everywhere for everyone, and top on that, be able to offer more content, to be able to handle the competition from all other entertainment offerings, then people understand why it's necessary. And in a small country like Norway, with our topography, it's also important to know that we can't afford to have full double distribution for many years, because, for example, our networks are bigger than the ones in UK. But we are 5 million people. They are 60 million people.
But still with the same cost.
Well, yeah, higher cost actually. So, and you know, the 5 FM networks, they cost the same per year as the 2 networks which give the population 30 DAB channels. So it will be wrong to continue for many years to spend the money on double distribution instead on content. For that would be the consequence.
I'm talking about distribution. I read that a couple of weeks after the switchover, one of the multiplexes went off. How robust is the network, and how much coverage is it got?
You know, the new modern DAB network are very robust, and that's built on several things. To begin with, the way DAB works, if you lose the audio for one transmitter, it's only that transmitter. On the FM networks, you have big main transmitters, and you have several repeaters, which also will go silent if the main transmitter goes off air. That's one part. And when we build the new networks, we also build it with double power, with battery backups, and better surveillance systems. So all in all, the new networks are much better and much more stable than the FM networks. But of course, people, you can have human wrongdoings everywhere. And the incident you talked about, that was a cable. Not one cable, not 2 cables, 3 cables at the same time that were ripped off. So yeah, you can't be sure or 100% sure to avoid that kind of stuff. But we have got now a 4th cable to try to avoid this happening again. So that didn't have anything to do with actually DAB networks. It was the audio that disappeared. Yeah.